My name is Anna Maria Lusardi, and I am the co-organizer, together with the Federal Reserve Board, of the Financial Literacy Seminar Series. This spring term, the seminar series will start with a distinguished financial literacy lecture. The speaker of this lecture today is Dean Peter Tufano. Peter Tufano, after spending 22 years as a professor of finance at Harvard Business School, has become the Dean of Said Business School at Oxford. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you so much.
What brought you to this topic?
I've been in academia for about 22 years, most of those at Harvard Business School and recently at Oxford. And so my first 10 years, I really spent time teaching students, thousands of students, how to make millions of dollars. I was teaching financial engineering and structured products and the sort of things that work quite well in Wall Street. At a certain point, I decided it would be more fun to try to teach millions of people to make thousands of dollars. And so that kind of switch happened about 12 years ago and began when I started looking at how financial services were delivered in low-income communities, starting in Compton and Watts in South Central LA. That led to the next 12 years of research on consumer finance issues, especially around low-income folks, which obviously quickly takes me to the topic of what they do and don't know, and how that level of capability affects their decisions that they make and their ability to navigate the financial world.
And what do we know about how much people know and how they make financial decisions?
Well, I think we know a fair bit. Not all of it's terribly positive, I'm afraid. First, the work that's been done, including your own work, Anna, especially your own work, demonstrates that the level of financial skills or capabilities by most Americans, and in fact by most people around the world, is exceedingly low when asked to answer relatively simple questions that would allow them to make simple decisions about debt. As you and I both know, only about a third of Americans, and people from other countries as well, can navigate the simplest of questions. The second thing that we know is that these differences in financial skills or capabilities vary markedly across different populations. Unfortunately, some groups have even lower financial capabilities or skills or evidence skills than others. Women, the elderly, there's a number of other groups which, for whatever reason, it's hard to discern. Their level of capability, at least measured on the kinds of questions that one you normally use, is low. Third, I think we know that, and it's an aside a little bit, American households, many American households, are in not such great shape. Again, you and I have done work on financial fragility, where we've looked at to see whether or not Americans can access $2,000 in 30 days as a simple metric about how fragile their finances are, and unfortunately a large fraction of Americans can't. I think the fourth thing that we know, this is probably the thing that we know the least well, is that there's a correlation, leave it at that, a correlation between skills levels and financial fragility and other financial problems. Now, we have to stop short of, as academics, of saying there's causation, because the evidence isn't so robust at this point. But clearly, there's a lot of indicative evidence that this skills gap or skills deficit is related to either poor financial choices or kind of poor financial behaviors. And finally, the thing that we know less so from economics research than from other kinds of work that's being done, and that I'll talk about today, is that beyond the economics and statistics and numbers of financial literacy, how people think and feel about money and finances and savings and debt is intensely emotional. And this element of affect or emotion is quite strong. I think we have yet a lot more to learn about how that really works, and even more to learn about how to incorporate that into how to improve the financial lives of consumers.
Given these findings, what are the implications for institutions like the government, or for business, or for non-for-profits?
While there may have been a rhetoric around free markets and that everyone has all the equipment and information and decision-making ability to do anything they want, caveat emptor is a sufficient principle to rule. I think that what we've seen in the last so many years, and honestly, if you look at the history of consumer finance, is that that isn't a really good description of the world, and therefore there's a role for governments to step in and to set the rules of the game, as it were. And in fact, the rules of the game, if I can just, as an aside, that's one of the key intellectual themes that at Oxford we're working on. It's this notion that the rules of the game, both written and unwritten, effectively define the performance of financial systems, economic systems, and households. So rules of the game are a big deal. And government sets the rules of the game. So particularly here, what could governments do? I think there is, especially with the creation of the new Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, an opportunity to think about what those rules should be. So where, for example, should the government be nudging people into different kinds of behaviors by changing choice architecture? Where should they be setting kind of hard guardrails on the side of the road for financial institutions or setting up financial fiduciary duties? Where should they be emphasizing enhancing consumer skills? I see these as complementary actions that the government might want to do. For my personal, personally, I think that this kind of rulemaking and regulation and setting the rules of the game should be done informed by research. So one of the things I will also talk about today is some research that we did over the last 18 months, where we asked people, where do you want the government to give you a little bit more help? What are the parts of your financial lives that you can use some assistance on? So evidence-based regulation, I think, listening closely to these consumers, as opposed to assuming you know what they want and need, is one thing that governments could do.
And how about the implication for business?
The consumer finance businesses are huge, in the trillions of dollars. So if you look at the U.S. flow of funds data, it's been a few months since I've been in the States, but my recollection is that the total amount of consumer financial businesses, if you take both the left and right-hand side of the balance sheet in the households, is probably north of $70 or $80 trillion. So there are lots of consumer financial businesses. What are the implications of the skills deficit and the financial problems for businesses? Well, some businesses might take advantage of that. And in fact, and that's unfortunate, but what we see is a bunch of business practices which are predicated on sloppy consumers. Consumers who either are inattentive, who are ill-informed, maybe well-informed at the outset, but then kind of fail to follow up. So whether it's as simple as consumers, and I'm one of them, who sign up for health clubs and then fail to go, or consumers who make a decision on the basis of a rebate and then choose to never honor that, or mail it in or get online to do it. Or in other instances, whether it's overdraft practices or petty lending practices. It's sad to say, but a number of businesses are predicated, I think, in terms of short-run advantages and on really thinking about and taking advantage of sloppiness of consumers. I think there's a whole other set of business models which are predicated on trying to figure out how you build a business around both smart and smarter consumers. For example, I think an example would be the creation of the index mutual fund industry, appealing to consumers to have them realize that they're less likely, rather than more, to be able to select a successful active investment manager. And there are others as well. So I think the challenge on the business side, and certainly the kinds of challenge that I want to hold out for my students at Oxford, and hopefully your students here at George Washington, is to think of business models that can both make money, but do so in a way that relies on or enhances consumers' ability to make good decisions as opposed to bad decisions.
I want to talk also too about the non-for-profit, but
Sure.
actually more than in general, I would like to talk about the non-for-profit that you yourself have founded. And tomorrow, March 9, in Boston, Doorways to Dream will celebrate more than 10 years of activities. And congratulations to that great work. But can you tell us a little bit more about the work that Doorways to Dreams has done?
Sure. So we founded Doorways to Dreams, or D2D, as you said, a little bit more than 10 years ago. And it's a really simple concept. We're an R&D lab. We come up with new products and services, and then we help governments and businesses to implement those services to improve the lives of poor people. Our work has included a number of things, trying to figure out better ways to help people save. So for example, we did some experiments where we intervened in the tax refund process to try to help people save pay themselves first, save some and spend some. And pleased to say that that was quite successful, not only as an academic endeavor, but it also led to Form 8888, which allows people to split their refunds to spend some and save some. We then did work to try to see if you could attach to that split refund a savings option that was simple and that would appeal to people. And again, pleased to say that that research paid off as well, published in academic journals, but more importantly manifested in the government's decision to allow refund recipients to equivalently tick off a box and buy U.S. savings bonds. Our work has also taken some ideas from history and from abroad and tried to bring them into U.S. practice. In particular, the notion of marrying lotteries and savings vehicles in one, which is very popular since 1694 and is really evidenced in a product that we introduced along with credit unions in Michigan called Save to Win. And finally, a lot of the work that we do is about trying to find new ways to help people gain additional financial skills. One big stream of that work is around what we call financial entertainment, which is trying to make skill building fun and engaging and a little bit edgy so that people will gain additional skills by playing games. And I'll talk about those this afternoon, but you can put yourself in the role of either a financial manager of a screwed up celebrity and tackle the problem of how do I handle a debit card and a credit card and a small bank balance. Or if you want to think about how to plan for retirement, which is a long-lived decision, we amp up that decision by framing it around the vampire with the punchline when your eternal retirement is forever. So we've tried to do a number of things in conjunction with governments, with businesses, with other nonprofits to try to show that there's an ability to create financial innovations that can advance the kind of the interests of low-income families in America.
What do you see for the future, and what do you advocate for more work in this field?
I think that what we're working on, unfortunately, is not going to ever be solved. So if you look back over the history of consumer finance, I can't say I've done the full history, but just recently published a paper on the last 70 years or so of consumer finance in America. Many of the fundamental issues that we are dealing with have never gone away. They've always been there. And especially as the world gets more complex, the financial decisions that people are going to be asked to make will get increasingly hard. So I think we have a long-term agenda in front of us. I think for governments it's to figure out the rules of the game. I think for businesses it's to figure out, are there better business models that appeal to the angels in us as opposed to the devils in us. For nonprofits and NGOs, it's trying to innovate on the edges in order to try to make fundamental changes through both government and business. And I think there's a special role for researchers. You and I are both academics, and despite the fact that I'm a dean of a business school now, I remain a scholar and an academic, and I think we have a particular role in this, which is to, in an unbiased and objective way, to continue to test new ideas, to refine them, to debunk things that may sound sensible but aren't, to advance ideas that may sound counterintuitive but actually are quite sound. So I think there's a role for each of those three sectors, and then for us in particular to make sure that we advance the state of play, we provide policymakers with the kind of data that's going to lead to evidence-based policy, that with businesses the kind of information that perhaps we wish they would have otherwise known, but since they may not be in the business of collecting some of this information, informs them. So I think we all have a role to play. I think there's a lifetime of good work to be done in consumer finance and in enhancing consumer capabilities around finance.
Well, thank you very much, Peter. I look forward to the presentation this afternoon, and I invite everybody to watch the presentation, which will be posted online.
Thank you so much.